Alright folks, how's it going? It is December, it is snowing here, there's a ton of snow outside of my window, and I hope that you are sitting at home in a, maybe under a warm blanket, and that you are enjoying your time. Because Christmas is of course coming up, the end of the year is coming up, and with that we are now over 1 year of Victoria 3 after release already. We are after the release now of 1.5, and I kind of want to walk through that with the ups and the downs. Normally I don't do this anymore. I normally, when new patches come out, I just do reviews or I do news updates, that sort of stuff that are scripted and very concise. I don't think that's appropriate for 1.5 because this is a huge update, and I have so many thoughts on this and I would like to share them with you so that you can share your thoughts with me. I am really happy about this patch's content. I think there's so much great stuff in the actual journal entries and so on. There's so much great stuff in the art department. There is really good stuff in mechanical reworks, and at the same time, I'm really unhappy with this patch. I am despairing at the state that it was released in. There was an open beta that ran from August until November. I was very active in that open beta. I had a great time. I played on the channel. If you followed the channel, you will know this. We had a great Italy playthrough and a great Yugoslavia playthrough. So much stuff going on there. But the way this patch released is insanely frustrating, because this is the actual meme come to life. Oh, look, just another hotfix will fix this, and then after the next hotfix you will say just another hotfix will fix this. It's insanely frustrating to see the state of 1.5, especially after this very long open beta period and with how important the patch is. Listen, I said this way back in 1.3, I made a video in the post-mortem of that patch basically where I said, I think what is really important is that the hygiene factors are cleaned up. Nobody that is a casual player likes to sit down and then their front split and the entire progress is rolled back. Nobody likes to see any of that stuff, and it needs to be fixed, because after that we can work on expanding functions, we can, basically hypothesize about what should come next, but before that stuff is fixed, Warfare and whatever other system has similar quirks will always be annoying. 1.5 did a ton of that. 1.5's formations and all that stuff, we worked through it in the past. I'm not going to explain all the details here, please forgive me. I hope that you've been playing the game kind of, right, so that you know what I'm talking about here. 1.5 addressed many of these things on an underlying level. But the quality level of 1.5 makes it so that you can still have split fronts, that you can have force occupation, where somebody that isn't even at war with your target suddenly occupies a state of the target and you can't occupy it anymore. You will get frontlines splitting, frontlines doubling up, you will frontlines disappearing, you will have no pathfinding, where right now, and you know what, I'm just going to show this. I can literally show this because I know this is still in here because I tested it the other day. You can't, if you start declaring a war against the Mexicans at the very start of this game, you can't actually send your troops to the front line. Look at that, no path. All of that stuff is in here because 1.5 is released in a state that is depressingly unpolished. It really sucks. My first experience actually with 1.5 was really good. I was playing the HRE, you saw it on the channel, I was playing Bolivia, I was having a great time. But once you dig really deep, you will find so many edge cases that just don't work and that you have to account for. It's really frustrating. So that is why I'm saying I'm really happy about all the content. I'm not happy with the execution at all, because it's basically hotfix waiting room hell. Alright, but with that being said, let me just say, if you want to play Victoria 3, I recommend you do it. I recommend you will have a great time if you play with the Victoria Tweaks mod. That is a mod that I'm maintaining with Doodles, and I personally think that this is the way of playing this game right now. I can't play without it. We tweaked so many things. For example, many people don't know this, and I have a GIF of this. This should be running right now if I put it in the editing process. Right now, in vanilla, the AI doesn't understand that activating and deactivating mobilization options the way it's doing it in that GIF makes it so that it will have zero organization. I commented on this as well in the official forums that most people that are like, oh yeah, I understand the warfare system, they actually don't, because the AI is so buggy, but they don't notice this because they don't do as many observer games as I do, that when you have a great deal of progress, very quick progress in your front lines, chances are that it's not because you played better and that you like prepped your army better, it's because the AI is buggy. And if the AI is this buggy, we can't even balance for this, we can't really figure anything out there. In Victoria Tweaks, I did that. I balanced that stuff, I changed attrition, I did all that stuff. Please play with that mod, otherwise you will have a very troublesome experience. And even with Victoria Tweaks mod, it has to be said, there are some bugs that we just can't stop from happening. Anyway, for the rest of this video, I want to split this into two parts. I want to talk about, the aspects of this patch, how they came out, what I think about them, and then in the second one, I want to go a bit into the design of the game right now, because there's something that's concerning to me, and that is very important to me when it comes to Victoria 3. So, let's start first by taking a good look at this right here. When I said that we are in hotfix waiting room hell, then I basically meant this. This patch released in November under 1.5.7, then 1.5.8 released, then 1.5.9 released, then 1.5.10 released. You see it right here in the row. And now we're currently waiting for 1.5.11. How do I know that this is coming? Because they talked about it in the Discord. Which is a lot of hotfixes, and yet a lot of bugs still left in, a lot of not great balancing still left in. This stuff sucks. It really, really sucks, because it meant that I had to rework so many things on my end to make the game playable so that I wanted to do roleplay playthroughs. It also means that, well, basically, after the hotfix is before the hotfix, right? I will say, it's obviously nice that they are this diligent and that they are this fast at trying to squash the bugs, but man, 3 months of open beta and this many hotfix, it sucks. There's nothing else that I can say there. That is exactly how it is. So I wasn't kidding when I was talking about hotfix hell. But let's jump maybe a bit more into the details. Let's discuss what has changed in the game and whether it is good, whether it is great in theory, and whether it is good in practice. Unit formations, I think, are a hugely positive addition. I have some knickknacks there when it comes to cleaning it up, right? We're looking at a situation where it would be nice, for example, to have a bit more freedom with your ratios, how you can work that out. It is very fragile to a certain degree because, for example, Prussia spawns in with a cavalry corps that is only cavalry, and it existed historically speaking. It's really cool to have that historical thing. But that is something that then pushes your organization to 25%. I think we can actually take a look at this right here, because obviously having just a cavalry corps makes it so that, yep, you have too many special units, and all of a sudden you get a negative. Now, the AI doesn't fix this. The AI doesn't recruit infantry or anything in here, which means they run around with these really suboptimal things, and it's frustrating to see. But this is just a side note. Formations fundamentally are a really good addition. Instead of generals owning their troops, it is now formations owning their troops and generals being a part of it. I am a huge fan of this. This is a great shift, and I really hope to see this expanded upon. You can do so much here when it comes to the hierarchy within the formation, between formations, all that stuff. Really, really good. I'm a big fan of this for sure. The other thing, military graphics. I am an uncritical supporter of the art team of Victoria 3. I think they're doing a tremendous job. Huge fan. It looks amazing. The dioramas, and we can take a look at this, of course, as well. At least of the most basic dioramas, they look amazing. Look at them go right here. When they have battles, they shout, they cheer, they die directly in the battle itself. It is really cute. But I hope you get what I mean. I also still, I mean, I can only congratulate the art team with Dawn of Wonder. I love looking at cities at night. I think it is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and a huge fan. Uncritically support the art team for sure. Then we have some minor stuff like diplomatic state trading and impose laws on subjects. It's fine, doesn't really do anything negative. It's a good addition for sure. Local prices in states is a huge addition and hugely positive, although I would yet again argue that vanilla isn't too great at balancing them. There's a lot going on there that makes it so that the AI in particular basically just builds up one state, which is why, and I guarantee you can do this right now, if you have a save game in 1900, look around the AI, they will have very, very low amounts of railways, because with local prices, they will zero in on just a couple of states where they will build up for the rest of the game, which makes it so that since there's no infrastructure need in any other state, they never really build up the infrastructure. But that is an oversight. I hope it gets fixed eventually. Electricity is similar in terms of like not really being built by the AI, but let's put that aside for the time being. Local prices are a great addition. We've played with this in the game. Really cool stuff. Companies, a lot to expand upon, but honestly, the way they do competitive advantage, really cool stuff. Multiple battles and travel system for formations. I mean, it belongs basically into unit formations. I am not an enemy of any of this. It's just that, for example, the travel system, again, sometimes you can't find a path, sometimes the front line disappears, sometimes your troops run behind the front line and can't catch up with it. There's so many edge cases. These are the hygiene factors that should have been completely eliminated, but weren't. Kind of sucks. But it's a good system. If only the hotfixes for it already had arrived. Colonial administration and new formable nations. I'm actually a huge enemy of colonial administrations. I don't think it works at all. I say this mostly because basically the AI will release it, and then those colonial administrations will have no accepted pops. They will be slower at settling, they will be slower at industrializing, and the AI sometimes turns hostile towards them, re-annexes them, and re-releases them. It's just not a well-done feature. That's really all I can say there. And VTM, just for the record, we turned it off. The AI is not going to use it because colonial administrations just kind of suck. All of that aside, though, the fundamental change here on the military level, on the economic level, really, really cool stuff with a huge caveat. The balancing and the patches, it's not quite there yet. Now this right here might surprise you, as I had a huge video, a hugely negative video I should say, about Voice of the People. I really was not a big fan of the content implemented there. This right here, Colossus of the South, is an amazing region pack. I really, really love all the journal entries for Brazil, and you might notice that on my channel we do a lot of different roleplay nations. I haven't done one as France, just because I didn't like the Voice of the People content at all. I will be doing one as Brazil because I love this. These are amazing journal entries, they are amazingly complex, and they really add to what is going on. You can see right here they have a lot of factors that drive them into the positive or the negative side. There's so many interactions with Britain, with Bolivia and Peru, Bolivia of course. Magnanimous Monarch, after you read up on Pedro II, is so... it nails the entire thing. This is a really, really cool section of content. Paraguay, really difficult as well, but also really, really awesome. I love this content pack, okay? I think they really, really nailed it. And on top of that, I also want to say, the Voice of the People content that I most criticized, which was Divided Monarchists and the Paris Commune, over the course of the open beta have actually been updated and are really good as well now. I recommend that you play in France. I'm going to do it sooner rather than later as well. The content team has nailed it as well. There were some bugs here as well in this content. For example, with the Britain journal entry that corresponds to the Brazilian slavery one timing out too early, but these are minor things, very minor things. Big fan of this. Again, the main issue lies in the implementation and the execution of the actual mechanical changes. The way this patch released, it basically took care of most of the hygiene factors that are a thorn in everybody's side that plays this game, only to make it so that it's not polished enough that these hygiene factors are now actually cleaned out. We are looking at a situation where if you don't have a lot of patience with this game, if you don't dive into the files, if you don't play with the Victoria Tweaks mod, you're gonna run into a ton of issues that will happen. Now listen, I'll be entirely honest with you, I have modded this game to hell and back here after 1.5 came out in Victoria Tweaks mod. Doodles modded this game to hell and back. He put so many hours into this, and the result is a really nice playable Victoria Tweaks mod. But I am deeply frustrated over the fact how many hygiene changes we needed to make, where we basically needed to clean up because it just wouldn't work otherwise. There were bugs. It was a 3-month-long open beta, and then we have 3 hotfixes. We're waiting for the 4th one, and there's still so much that just doesn't work right with the fronts. It sucks. It just really sucks, and I think it's just not okay. Victoria 3 has a very troubled history with its patches needing hotfixes and so on. And this is no exception, which is depressing, because this patch is really good. The content is so good. The rework of, the formations and so on, really good, and yet deeply frustrating. There's nothing else that I can say that nothing that justifies it. It just sucks. Once that is fixed, or, if you already play with Victoria Tweaks mod, I've rebalanced attrition, I've rebalanced warfare, I've rebalanced naval warfare, I've rebalanced basically so much going on there. I've changed some of the journal entry requirements, I've made it easier, I've made it harder for certain things. We have done a ton of things. Doodles added pretty extensive, unbelievably huge AI sort of reevaluation of what laws they want to pass. You will see a better AI there just in all of these things. A point of note for me to end this whole thing about patches, this whole thing about rebalancing and so on, is fundamentally, and this is the segue into the other topic, the design topic that worries me, fundamentally, we're looking at a very unbalanced and, in many ways, broken game when it comes to, the way the AI approaches mobilization options and so on and so forth. There are a great many positive things. Again, I'm not really going over these too much. I talked about the content. There in the AI strategies, the vanilla AI actually got a lot more active. They made some really amazing changes there. Big fan. They open up a lot of stuff, for example, for the growth curve. They gave us a lot of stuff that we can tweak. I'm really happy about this. But, again, for me, the way it came out isn't that great. And to make this, again, into a segue where we will then move on into the design question, the goal of Victoria Tweaks mod, when we started doing this in the open beta 1.2, we are now on 1.5, was to sort of feature test. I sometimes take a look at what the devs are doing and I say I really don't agree with the balancing here. I think this should be different. And I wanted to make a case with this mod that says, hey, check this out. This is how it works. And I think this is better than vanilla. We are now way past this. The original vision, we're way past this. We're doing so many more things in terms of how the AI evaluates laws, in terms of how the AI behaves, in terms of whether the AI understands that it doesn't want to activate mobilization options on and off, that it wants to have the training methods on the highest level and so on. We are so much deeper into the weeds there, and I don't like it. I'm really frustrated by this because this wasn't a cleanup mod. This was a mod that wanted to explore different balancing arrangements and so on, different tweaks. But the original goal of it to be deprecated when the tweaks either were no longer necessary because the devs found a better solution or the devs took over this solution, I don't think it's viable anymore. We're at a point where the Victoria Tweaks mod is now permanently to be maintained because we are so far removed from this. And this brings me to a different thing. Patches and bugs can be fixed. This can be done. There's obviously an issue with the AI, and obviously that's not working as designed, which means the devs are gonna get there. There is a difference though when it comes to basic design, right? Victoria 3 does something that I really love. Victoria 3, different from Victoria 2 and different from Victoria 1, obviously, I mean, it's Victoria 1, what are you gonna do? Depicts the entire population, okay? In Victoria 2, you basically could always assume that you had roughly 1/4 of the population actually depicted as pops because they only depicted the workforce. In Victoria 3, that is different. We have dependence, and we can shift this ratio very deliberately. It's a huge part of this, how this game plays, and so on and so forth. This makes it so that at the start of the game, we're actually looking at, whatever we have in statistics, a relatively reliable population that is realistic. Now, Vanilla has made a conscious choice to not follow historical growth patterns, right? The way Vanilla views population growth is through a lens where if you play better, because only a relatively high standard of living is going to give you population growth, you are going to get more population growth. Which means you won't have a boom period until you get a ton of standard of living in your population. Now, what that means is that in Vanilla, the growth curve physically cannot produce this. It is logically impossible. The tired, poor, and huddled masses that go to the Americas. Because think about it. The big population increase only happens if I bring the standard of living up. I understand the way this is designed from a pure design point of view. You do something good like playing well, you get rewarded with pop growth and you can play even better. But historically speaking, Europe grew like crazy in this period. And they were all dirt poor. Germans, for example, I don't think I actually taught this to this degree, but like in 1880 and, well, in the 1880s, that was the period of the biggest migration of Germans to the Americas because life sucked in Germany. That is the period where welfare laws were actually introduced to make life suck a little bit less, where some political rights were improved and so on and so forth, right? The whole Bismarck reform and so on. Those people weren't rich, which means it is highly anachronistic what is happening there. And I want to stress here, I'm not fundamentally against the devs doing things differently from history. But what I will say is that I'm at a loss of words in a certain regard, because if you think about it, why are we simulating every pop, the whole population, if we don't want to look at historical patterns? Socialism in a world where there is no overpopulation, where there is no poor understrata, where everybody is rich because you don't grow unless you're rich, makes no sense. Why would there be socialism if I'm rich already anyway as a laborer, as whatever, and so on? And the same thing is true with the migration to the Americas. If we are not overcrowded here and there's not enough work, or I have to live in a really terrible housing with 1 million other people at the same time, why would I migrate to the Americas? Now, they did fix, in a certain way, migration in Victoria 3 Vanilla now, making it so that they're actually looking at a situation where migration happens again. You can get pretty big movements, but they're not happening for the right reasons. They're happening for no reason, really. Yeah, there might be turmoil, but like, everybody can be rich if you just build it up. There's no trouble there. This is fundamentally a real issue for me, because what it means is any historical number of GDP, any historical number of literacy, any historical number of political movements, of socialism, of fascism, of monarchism, of republicanism, of electoralism, and so on and so forth. Any war loss numbers, so how many people died in this war, none of these numbers in Victoria 3 Vanilla make sense anymore. They're not applicable, because our population rate is not the same. The standing army of any European power, for example, at the eve of World War I can never be implied to also be the goal of our general standing armies in Victoria 3 in vanilla, because the population is not comparable. This frustrates me a lot, because I think it might explain why the game is relatively poorly balanced. How could the game be balanced if you need to reinvent, you need to re-explore what the actual expectation for late game population, GDP, literacy, wealth, and so on look like, because your entire population is totally different from what it was historically. This has me worried, because this patch is deeply, deeply unbalanced. Don't let anybody tell you different. I'm sorry, it's deeply unbalanced. And basically what I did in Victoria Tweaks mod, I just looked at historical numbers. I created a growth curve where we have this spurt. There's a huge explosion as soon as you start industrializing. Those people get frustrated at home, they migrate. You as Germany, for example, like, yeah, thank God they're migrating, because they were unemployed, they were angry, and they hated me. They migrate. The migratory nations over in the Americas are really happy, get their historical population, and in the end, I can bring up my standard of living, we flatten out slightly, right? We do the demographic transition, or we start the demographic transition, we flatten out. And at that point, we arrive in like 1914, and the historical German borders have the historical expectation, if you will, right? The fact that we can't really do this in vanilla is worrisome to me, because it means that whatever changes, whatever expectations we have from history are completely non-applicable, and it starts with the pops. And there doesn't seem to be any intention to bring the pops in line with history. Which, again, from a game design point of view, I get it. From a historical, can I even look at this period through this historical lens at all in this game? I think we're missing the forest for the trees. I think... Again, in Victoria Tweaks mod, it's different, just for the record, and I think it works significantly better, because when you see losses in a war, they are roughly comparable to what you see historically. When you see birth rate, they are roughly comparable to what you can see historically. You can go above that, you can go significantly below this. Yes, of course, that is a sandbox game. But the general curve isn't just completely detached from this. Honestly, I'm not sure whether I'm able to bring my point across here, but even if you have a perfectly patched game, the expectation, I think, that we all have, where we roughly compare what happened historically to not historically, to get the same tendencies, not the same guarantees. I never want to see something just, boom, it's cut in stone, you can't change it. Absolutely not. I share the mindset of the developers there in that sense, without a doubt. But starting with population, everything is so far removed from anything that happened historically that having pops almost makes no sense. Because at the start of the game, the pops match their historical inspiration one-to-one, and then they are completely removed from it, which means your army size, your economy, and so on and so forth, completely removed from it. That worries me a lot, because this tendency has now been confirmed with the updates, and just for the record, by the way, they did some amazing updates to pop growth. They included pollution, literacy, so much stuff. I love it, and I'm using it for Victoria Tweaks mod. It made my job significantly easier, but the way it's implemented here really, really sucks. There's no overcrowding in Europe, there's no migration to the Americas, there's no boom or bust, there's just a boom when you're already outperforming incredibly well. It sucks. And this tendency, again, puts everything at risk, in my eyes anyway, because what it means is you can't compare anything you do past the start date to the historical trend line. It doesn't make sense. There's no comparison that makes sense. I just feel that in certain ways, the game, the way it is now designed, asks what would be a nice design challenge, a nice a challenge to the player, and a nice reward for that, rather what were the historical challenges? Why were people so drawn to socialism? Why did people migrate? What did all these things look like? That's not really happening right now. And I have no other words than that I think that sucks. I try to counteract that as much in Victoria Tweaks mod. It's not about historicity. It's not about entirely just, imitating history. I'm not a fan. I don't care for that stuff. But if the game has a one-to-one pop simulation and then population has nothing to do with historical alignment, what's the point? That's really all my take. Fundamentally, I love 1.5 because I think many of these changes are so good. And after we tweaked them with 1.5 Victoria Tweaks mod, which is updated, you can play it right now as it is, we are looking at a really, really fun experience. It's just that, we are crazy removed from vanilla now. It's an insane degree of how far away we have moved from there. And I really had wished that was the opposite. right? I wish we could deprecate like 90% of that mod, only include a couple of minor tweaks, but it's become the opposite. It's basically a total rework mod at this point. Right. That's my frustration, because it's the wrong direction in my eyes. If we have no comparison there, then like, yeah, we'll see how that behaves. All the rise of the historical things that we assume about the spirit are no longer really truthful. They don't really play a role, and that's not good. That's a worrisome thing. Having the same results is not good. Not even asking the same questions is bad. It's even worse. So yeah, great game. Play it with the Victoria Tweaks mod.